The reading is from chapter 13th of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is speaking. True wisdom is of a spiritual kind, is freedom from self-esteem, hypocrisy, and injury to others. It is patience, sincerity, respect for spiritual instructors, purity, firmness, self-restraint, dispassion for objects of sense, freedom from pride, and a meditation upon birth, death, decay, sickness, and error. It is an exemption from self-identifying attachment for children, wife, and household, and a constant unwavering steadiness of heart upon the arrival of every event, whether favorable or unfavorable. It is a never-ceasing love for me alone, the self being effaced, and worship paid in a solitary spot, and a want of pleasure in congregations of men. It is a resolute continuance in the study of Adhyatma, the superior spirit, and a meditation upon the end of the acquirement of a knowledge of truth. This is called wisdom or spiritual knowledge. Its opposite is ignorance. I will now tell thee what is the object of wisdom, from knowing which a man enjoys immortality. It is that which has no beginning, even the supreme Brahma, and of which it cannot be said that it is either being or non-being. It has hands and feet in all directions, eyes, heads, mouths, and ears in every direction. It is immanent in the world, possessing the vast whole. Itself without organs, it is reflected by all the senses and faculties. Unattached, yet supporting all, without qualities, yet the witness of them all. It is within and without all creatures, animate and inanimate. It is inconceivable because of its subtlety, and although near, it is afar off. Although undivided, it appeareth as divided among creatures, and while it sustains existing things, it is also to be known as their destroyer and creator. It is the light of all lights, and is declared to be beyond all darkness. And it is wisdom itself, the object of wisdom, and that which is to be obtained by wisdom. In the hearts of all it ever presideth. Thus hath been briefly declared what is the perishable body, and wisdom itself, together with the object of wisdom. He, my devotee, who thus in truth conceiveth me, obtaineth my state. And with that, we'll go to today's talk on Theosophical Symbolism.
Thank you. Friends, thank you for joining today. Today's talk is part of a series that this lodge usually does on the first Sunday of each month on the topic of theosophical symbols. Typically, we take a specific symbol, and that format is being covered very well by another student of the lodge. So today, we'd like to take the opportunity to step back a bit and talk about symbolism itself, especially in a theosophical context, as well as explore a couple of related theosophical ideas, and a little bit about how the study of symbols can benefit us as students of theosophy. This is not intended to be a thorough treatment of symbology in an academic sense or even in a theosophical sense, but just a side trip through a couple of adjacent theosophical ideas that might be interesting to consider. A few weeks ago, there was a presentation on the topic of illusion and reality. We explored the idea that everything we experience in the day-to-day world is an illusion, and that the true reality is something that stands behind our sensory experiences. This is not to say that this collective illusion is necessarily bad. It's actually the natural state of the universe. If we look closely, though, we can see that everything is in this beautiful process of becoming, from within outward, from the unseen to the seen, from the unmanifest to the manifest. It's just the natural order of things. This illusionary world, everything around us, all of our senses, is like a classroom. If you think back to any school you've ever been in, it's always a simulation of the real world. If you went to business school, for example, you're taught business concepts, marketing, strategies, finance. You may have exercises and projects, and internships, but these are all part of the instruction. You aren't expected or entrusted to start and run a real business until you've learned from the classroom environment. Classrooms and schools are representative of reality. They shed light on reality, but we shouldn't mistake them for reality. The topic of illusion and reality naturally lays a foundation for the discussion of symbols and symbolism. Anything we see can be considered a representation of a hidden reality behind it. Just the desk that we're working on has some veneer of wood. It's made of some composite materials, some fixatives and adhesives. They're in turn made of complex chemical structures, patterns of molecules. The molecules themselves are made of atoms and so on. There's these layers of illusion and reality that can only be peeled back a few times until we reach the boundaries of what modern science can explain. Science can observe and predict and explain the behavior of these atoms, and even to some extent, science can explain the origins. Everything is made of stardust, but science can't really explain the fundamental nature of matter itself, let alone its purpose. Theosophy can help here. As we know, the purpose of manifestation is the evolution of consciousness. Symbolism is another way that we can represent reality. Every symbol is a bridge that connects us to our truer reality in a way that is focused and intentional. All of manifestation itself is, in its own way, a symbol of the unmanifest. But when we talk about symbols in a philosophical context, they are more than just material artifacts of manifestation. They're the deliberate encoding of truth into a form that can be preserved and understood. Symbols are a way for concepts, both simple and complex, to be preserved and shared. They are universal and exist separate and apart from any one language. Within every symbol is that reality that the symbol represents. They are formed by a point of focus that has evolved over countless eons to pierce the barrier between illusion and reality. A symbol is a bridge between the seen and the unseen. It stands between the world of forms and the world of inner realities, and allows something of the invisible to be communicated through the visible. Because the higher aspects of truth cannot be contained in any literal language, symbols become a means by which those truths can be suggested, pointed to, or reflected in ways that we can approach with the mind. A symbol communicates inwardly and outwardly. It presents outwardly as some recognizable form, something we can point to, describe, contemplate. Inwardly, it gestures toward principles that are deep, that belong to deeper levels of being. These principles are not easy to state directly because they are universal and abstract, and they often transcend the limits of speech, but we have always intuited them. And throughout the ages, we've attempted to encode these intuitions into symbolic shapes. The circle, the lotus, the mountain, the path, the heart, the flame, the wheel, countless others have served as vessels of meaning that the literal mind cannot reach alone. Symbols also play a protective function. The impulse of wisdom into the world from the adepts moves through cycles, sometimes even periods of decline or spiritual obscuration. Teachings can be distorted or even forgotten. Symbols are better able to survive these darker periods. They persist and endure like a seed that allows the inner meaning to wait for more favorable conditions before sprouting again before rebirth. When the time is right, when minds and hearts are again receptive, the wisdom can blossom again through the symbol. In this way, symbolism allows sacred wisdom to endure in ways that written or oral traditions cannot. Another important aspect of symbolism is in its capacity to train one's intuition. Literal language appeals to the reasoning mind, but symbols awaken a different mode of knowing. They invite us to pause, to turn inward, to sense a resonance between outer form and inner reality. When we meditate on a symbol, we're not just thinking about it, we're encouraging it and allowing it to work on us, to create a bridge between our concrete mind and our higher faculties. This is why symbolism has always been central in all spiritual teachings. Studying symbols cultivates the habit of looking past appearances to discern the meaning behind them. However, symbolism can carry some risk. It's possible to become so absorbed in the outer image that we forget it is only an image. The outer form is not the inner truth that it is representing. If we mistake the symbol for the reality, it becomes a barrier rather than a bridge. This is why it's important to always move beyond the form to the principle it expresses. The outer form is only the doorway. The work of the student is to step through that doorway into the truth that the symbol was meant to evoke. We have this same challenge with the world around us, the manifested world appearing as reality. If we don't remember that it is only representative of the unseen reality behind all of that, then again, it becomes a barrier rather than a bridge. When we look at the body of theosophical literature, we can see how universal symbols appear across cultures and ages to represent metaphysical laws. These symbols recur in ancient scriptures, myths, rituals, and esoteric diagrams, not because the cultures borrowed from one another, although they did do that, but because all are drawing from the same underlying patterns of nature. Theosophy holds that truth is one, even though it's expressed in many ways. Symbolic forms that appear in Egypt, India, Greece, Tibet, and even in the Americas point to the same foundational ideas about the origin of the universe, the evolution of consciousness, and the principles of human nature. Indeed, when HPB puts the three fundamental propositions in the Secret Doctrine, she is really summarizing some of these universal concepts that we find in all of these traditions. The universality is supported by the ancient teaching that there is a correspondence between the macrocosm and the microcosm. The larger universe and the individual human share parallel structures, rhythms, and laws. Symbolic systems reflect this. The sun may symbolize the central spiritual source, while the human heart symbolizes the inner seat of consciousness. A mountain may represent the ascent of the cosmos, while also representing the ascent of the soul towards realization. Symbols can move fluidly between cosmological, psychological, and ethical meanings while remaining consistent and useful. Theosophy encourages us to examine and interpret mythology, cosmology, and sacred imagery, not as literal accounts of historical events, but as a method of learning designed to reveal truths that are difficult to put into plain language. Myths are deliberate symbolic constructions meant to convey principles about the soul, nature, and the cycles of existence. A battle among the gods may represent forces within the universe, and it may represent forces within ourselves. An egg may signify the latent potential of the universe before manifestation, or it may just be something that we shouldn't count before it's hatched. When we approach these ideas symbolically, they become rich sources of insight rather than puzzles to be taken literally or dismissed. Underlying all of this is the use of analogy and correspondence as a method of uncovering meaning. Since the same laws operate at every level of existence, understanding a symbol in one context often sheds light on its meaning in another. HBB and Judge both relied on this method extensively. They placed symbols from different cultures side by side to reveal shared principles and deeper connections. Analogy is a disciplined way of reading the universe as an organic whole, by recognizing the parallels between inner and outer worlds, between the cosmos and the individual. We begin to see that symbolism is not simply a tool for interpretation. It is a way of perceiving unity where the surface of life presents as separateness. If we consider chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita, as we heard in the reading, we find a fascinating perspective on this distinction between the manifest and the unmanifest, the causal noumenon and its phenomenal effect. In this section, Krishna defines a distinction between the field of knowing, the knower, and the object to be known. Krishna describes these as three interconnected realities that shed light on the nature of human life and the purpose of spiritual discipline. Krishna speaks of the field of Kshetra. In the unfolding story of the Guru, this is the Kurukshetra, the land of the Kurus. Metaphysically, the Kshetra is the field, the entire domain of manifestation and embodied experience. The body, the senses, the emotions, the mind, and everything that can be known or experienced in the ever-changing world around us. The field is the arena of action, development, relationship, and relativity. It is what we normally identify as reality because it's what we see, touch, and feel and continuously interact with. But the Gita encourages us to recognize that this field, vast though it is not the source of our consciousness. It is only the environment in which it's expressed. Krishna talks about the knower of the field, the Kshetrajna. This is the witnessing consciousness, the inner perceiver, who is aware of the body but not limited by it, aware of thoughts but not identical with them. The knower is the silent presence in each one of us that registers every experience but remains itself unchanged. Throughout the Gita, this knower is presented as universal. At the heart of every being, behind every mind and personality, the same knower exists. When Krishna declares, "I am the knower in every body," he's not speaking metaphorically. He's pointing to the unity of consciousness that underlies all manifold forms. In this chapter, Krishna describes the Supreme Spirit as the ultimate reality that is to be known, to be realized, to be recognized as what is actually real. While the knower is the divine presence within the individual, the Supreme Spirit is the boundless, all-pervading essence that the knower ultimately recognizes as its own source. It is the origin, support, and goal of all life. The Supreme Spirit is not separate from the knower, but is its highest nature, its fullest expression. Knowing is not simply to gather information. It is to awaken, reveal, or unveil that which has always been true. When we approach symbolism in this light, the picture becomes clearer. The field contains symbols, the knower perceives them, and the Supreme Spirit is the truth that they gesture toward. The Gita invites us to be aware of all three dimensions so that outward experience becomes a doorway to inner realization. In Theosophy, the physical world is only the final expression of a process that begins on subtler levels of being. The astral plane or astral light is described as the formative matrix in which the patterns of life take shape before they appear outwardly. This gives us another approach to understanding Theosophical symbolism. It may help us to understand the relationship between truths and the symbols that express them by looking at the relationship between the physical and the astral. The astral is often called the model or design plane. It functions like the blueprint upon which the physical world is constructed. Just as an architect creates a design for a building before the building can be constructed, nature operates through inner prototypes. Every form, whether a molecule or a mountain, a city or a civilization, begins as an impression on the astral plane. This subtle field is responsive to energy and consciousness. It receives impressions and holds them in fluid dynamic patterns that guide the eventual manifestation of physical structure. The idea is presented as a law of nature. The physical world is dense and relatively slow to change. The astral, by contrast, is more malleable and responsive. It reflects forces more quickly and adjusts continuously. Because of this, all growth, decay, transformation, and regeneration in the physical realm are shaped by causes that operate first on the astral level. The astral is not separate from the physical. It interpenetrates it, supports it, and gives it form. This has important implications for our understanding of symbolism. Symbols appear in myths, dreams, rituals, and in spiritual teachings because they arise from truths that exist on a causal plane. They are reflections of archetypal processes that govern nature and consciousness. When a spiritual teaching uses a particular symbol, it is drawing from this realm of inner prototypes. This idea also has implications for how we conduct ourselves. Our thoughts, emotions, intentions, and desires leave their mark on the astral substance. They shape the astral field around us, which in turn influences our physical circumstances and karmic experiences. Nothing occurs outwardly that does not first take form inwardly. An ethical life, therefore, is not simply a matter of outward behavior. It is the steady cultivation of positive patterns in our thoughts. When the astral model is harmonious, clear, and elevated, the physical expression follows in due course. In this way, the astral pattern for the universe mirrors the inner life of the student. The more we understand this, the more we begin to see that symbolism is not only for interpreting the world, it is for understanding how the world actually forms around us. Symbolism is not simply an intellectual subject. For a theosophist, the study of symbols cultivates the perception of unity behind diversity. Instead of seeing the world as a collection of disconnected events or separate things, separate beings, the student begins to sense an underlying coherence. Patterns repeat, principles echo across different domains, and meanings that were once scattered begin to converge. This gradual recognition of unity arises naturally as the student becomes accustomed to looking beneath the surface of things. Symbolism trains the intuition to sense the hidden threads that link all life and all lives. In this way, the study of symbols encourages inner transformation rather than focusing on externalities. A symbol may appear outwardly as a gesture, a diagram, or a myth, but its purpose always points inward. Symbols always invite the student to awaken the quality or principle that the symbol represents. Symbols promote understanding and restore inner meaning, and Theosophy encourages us to be living expressions of that understanding. When the student understands that every action has a subtle origin and every thought leaves an impression on the astral field, ethical living becomes a natural extension of insight. Ethical conduct is no longer a set of imposed rules. It becomes the deliberate shaping of our inner archetypes that eventually manifest in our character and our karmic circumstances. Meditation on symbols becomes more purposeful because contemplating a symbol allows the mind to focus and to tune to deeper and more direct levels of awareness. Symbolism also trains the mind to seek the hidden aspects of nature. The world is not complete in its physical appearance. There are forces, energies, and intelligences that operate behind the scenes, and symbols are often their most accessible expressions. When we learn to read the world symbolically, ordinary experiences become gateways into deeper understanding. Ultimately, symbols point us toward a more direct and authentic realization of the knower and the known. It leads our consciousness back to its own source. Symbols, when fully understood, connect us to the truths that they represent. And in this way, symbols reveal the unity of the manifest and the unmanifest. Symbolism, then, in the theosophical sense, is more than intellectual curiosity. It's a functional tool for consciousness and awareness. Symbols help us perceive connections we might otherwise overlook. They prompt us to ask what stands behind the world of form, what lives within experience, and what influences shape our lives from subtler levels. Each symbol is an invitation to move inward along a path of meaning from appearance towards essence, from the field of knowledge to the knower, and ultimately to the thing to be known. When viewed in this light, every aspect of manifestation, what we call our day-to-day reality, becomes symbolic. Every form in nature expresses some aspect of an underlying principle. Every cycle, pattern, and rhythm reflects deeper laws operating behind the scenes. The physical world is not a self-contained domain. It is the outer face of forces, ideas, and archetypes that work through it. To understand the world symbolically is to see it as vibrant, significant, and important. It is the realization that the universe is not a random collection of events, but a coherent expression of consciousness unfolding in diverse and meaningful ways. For spiritual seekers, this understanding can be transformative. Symbolism encourages us to align our inner life with the principles we perceive. When thoughts, motives, and actions reflect a unified intention, our outer life will express this inner life. What we do mirrors what we understand. What we express mirrors what we aspire towards. In this alignment, the individual becomes a conscious participant in the larger harmony of nature, embodying the laws that govern the cosmos. In the end, symbolism leads us to not just interpret the world, but to exist in it with awareness. It encourages us to live mindfully, to act with understanding, and to recognize in ourselves the same patterns of truth that we see in the universe. I'm happy to take any comments or questions at this time.
Thanks, Josh. An excellent overview of the whole concept of symbolism. So you pointed out that in order for an individual to really grasp the true meaning behind a symbol, you have to kind of gradually awaken your intuition. Otherwise, you stand a risk of misinterpreting or reading it completely wrong. And we see that quite very pervasive in institutionalized religion, right? Every religion. Can you offer some practical hints on how we can gradually awaken that intuition? So when you look at, even, for example, you talked about in the poem that the disc with the dot in the middle, right? And if you're not taught it, we wouldn't really know what it is. It's hard to, and then once, in Secret Doctrine, the couple sentences where it talks about the dawn of awakening, then you suddenly say, aha, that's what it means. Can you offer some good hints in terms of how do we sharpen our intuition? How do we gradually awaken it so we can really see the truth behind the veil, right? So to speak.
Yeah, it's a great question. practical tips for cultivating intuition and the ability to see the truth in a symbol without necessarily having to be taught it. I think we probably all three of us could offer, some tips. Everyone, I'm sure, has their own ways of doing this. I think it's worth remembering and considering that intuition is like so many other things that, as we use it, it gets stronger. So always taking opportunities to try to see the hidden message behind something, not just accepting the explanation, but trying to apply it in a way that can generate ideas and thoughts about it. It's one thing to be taught something academically, we can read it in the Secret Doctrine, what a symbol means, but bringing that symbol into our meditation is probably the best way to cultivate intuition. I think any academic explanation of here's a symbol and here's what it means is really just a starting point. It's really up to us to check and test and verify whether that explanation makes sense and whether it stands up to the light of reason and to the scrutiny of Harmonis and ultimately, to Buddhi, and make sure that we can really validate and authenticate, what the explanation is. Because as you mentioned, it's every tradition is full of misunderstood symbols, or symbols that are only understood at a very surface level. We didn't really talk about it in this presentation, but right, every symbol has 7 interpretations. And the ones that were given, the ones that can be captured in writing, are not necessarily, those are just like the beginning of those 7. It goes deeper and deeper as you apply more and more of your own sort of meditative insight into them. I don't know if that helps. That's not necessarily a tip or a trick per se, but just a way of thinking about it. Thoughts, Kathy?
Well, I guess I was going to move on to maybe a different angle.
Sure.
You had talked about, when the understanding becomes transformative. And I was trying to just work with when does that happen? Like when you first look at it, it's rarely then. After a while, it's sort of like you have to make a home for it in your mind. It seems like. So I was just, like in Zen Buddhism, it seems like there's these very sudden realizations, transformations. And, maybe just the student's experience is that it rarely happened. It usually like slowly works within you. I'm sure it's a little bit different for everybody, but I was just focused on when and how that transformation of understanding takes place when studying a symbol.
Yeah, I mean, if we're taking it in the context of, the astral, right? Taking a symbol, an idea, and meditating on it and thinking about it, and as you said, making a place for it in your mind, or making a place for it in your heart, or in your sort of inner life. It does take time for that to become manifest, let's say physically, or at least in terms of your sort of karmic circumstances. There's a lot of forces at work there that have to align in order for things to manifest. I think there's a distinction between, you mentioned Zen, between a sort of instantaneous realization versus a transformation. It's one thing to realize something. You can hear a Zen koan and be suddenly inspired and suddenly have this realization about some philosophical truth. making a place for it. I love that expression, but making a place for it in your inner nature, and then actually transforming yourself, allowing your consciousness to be transformed by that, and then even transforming your outward behavior based on that. I think that's not typically an instantaneous thing, even though the realization might be. There's a lot of work that goes into making that realization consistent and persistent in your nature. That is to say, we might realize it, but we don't practice it. We forget almost immediately, and it takes a lot of like continuous effort to sort of be consistent and persistent with inculcating those philosophical ideas into some kind of practical aspect of our nature.
Yeah. Is it inevitable? If you take up a symbol, is it inevitable that you will experience a transformation?
I don't know if I'm qualified, or any students necessarily qualified, to say about any. It's all going to be sort of a case-by-case basis. I don't think anything is inevitable. People do forget. People do backslide. If and is a transformation permanent? All transformation permanent? I don't think so. I think it is possible to have an understanding about something and not put the work in to make it an aspect of one's nature. So I don't think it's inevitable. I think it will require, sort of consistent and authentic.
The inner conditions have to be ripe to some extent. Like it's a lock and a key and a lock, excuse me, but it may not work on the first turn, I guess.
Right, or you can put the key in the lock, but if you don't turn it, it's not going to open, right? You need to actually turn the key. And in fact, I think it said you need to turn the key 7 times to unlock those things. So I guess that's a symbolic way of expressing what we mean here about how to approach symbols and how they would encourage transformation. I think the statement is that it can be transformative, but it doesn't necessarily have to be transformative. It's really kind of what you make of it.
Does our personality get in the way of seeing the true meaning behind symbols? And
I'm sorry, does what get in the way?
Does our personality get in the way?
Yeah, I mean, the personality is going to be kind of a distractor, I guess, for lack of a better word, that I can think of at the moment, because the personality it's so immersed in the illusion. It's so much just part of manifested existence. It has virtually no reality whatsoever. It's so much the subject of everything else going on. It's downstream of everything in that regard. So how much it can be a hindrance in the sense that we identify with the personality, and as the more we identify with the personality, the less we're able to see the truth behind symbols. So in as much as we can transcend the personality, we can be more, we're just better trained to see the reality behind symbols, see the truth that the symbols represent. Maybe this goes back to your first question. What can we do to sort of cultivate intuition? And part of that is to transcend the personality, whenever possible. That will naturally lead us towards a cultivation of intuition.
Yeah, if the symbol is on different levels in our being, it seems like for sure the personality can throw up a hindrance, but it might still be working at a deeper level on in some other aspect.
Mhm. It's intimated in the secret doctrine that, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it's something like, there's a symbol that the flashing gaze of the seer, can essentially know all of the secret doctrine just in that symbol, just a glance at that symbol. And we have to imagine that this seer is really a Mahatma or an adept, someone who has so well refined their higher nature and their ability to communicate with their higher nature and act as the higher nature, means that they're seeing all 7 levels of the symbol at the same time. It's only like one symbol at our level of just like the basic surface of it. Somebody has to explain what it means before we really necessarily understand it. But when you have cultivated and refined your intuition, and become like a pure, just vessel or container for for Buddhi to inform your whole existence, you can see more of those 7 levels when you look at a symbol. So it becomes more immediately apparent what's contained in the symbol for truth.
There has to be like a vibrational harmony, I guess.
Everything is, right? Everything is electromagnetic vibration. Everything in manifestation, everything under Brahma or something like that. So symbols would, of course, have a similar correspondence, and should be something that can be described as having a electromagnetic value, I guess, if that's the right word, or frequency. Right.
I was thinking that if symbols are sort of a concentrated information, concentrated knowledge, so they probably have also much higher vibration electromagnetic signal.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, in science, we talk about, like the amount of information that can be contained in a one-dimensional object versus a two-dimensional object versus a three-dimensional object, right? Every time you add a dimension, you increase the information density logarithmically and end up with, if you're talking about something that is 7 dimensions or 7 levels deep, the information density, if you were able to access it at all of those levels, must be, I mean, this is speculation on my part. This is not something I've read in Theosophy, but just riffing on what you said, Sandra, it does sound like, if you could see at all 7 levels, the information density would be quite high. It's just a borderline infinite to our consciousness, right?
Mr. Judge says that words are like living things. So symbols must be like living things too, right? Because they're so, like you were just saying, concentrated.
Yeah. Judge says, let us use well these messengers called words, and the same must apply to symbols. I mean, one of the ideas of today's presentation was to take take some adjacent ideas, like the idea of the astral and the physical, and one being a symbol of the other, and the idea of that symbols take lots of different forms. Language, of course, is another form of symbol, or another form of symbolism. Every word, I think Mr. Judge maybe even uses the word entity somewhere. It has a kind of entitative existence. Surely symbols do as well. And we should apply the same exhortation to use them well. So, yeah, great point.
Just one more question. So, so we all live in the objective plane, right? And I think we'll be in this plane for many, many lives till we are at a certain level. So is this, does living on an objective plane almost by de facto create an obstacle in us really trying to sharpen our intuition to be able to understand the symbols? And as you said, if it's seven-dimensional, that takes an enormous amount of advancement to really be able to grasp that.
Well, let's start with the premise there. Do we live in an objective plane? We do, but we don't only live in an objective plane, right? We have a physical body that corresponds to the physical plane, and then we have, many other aspects of our nature that correspond to more and more rarefied and refined, higher vibrational aspects of our nature. We're seven-dimensional beings in that sense, and we can at any time transcend the objective plane through meditation, through exercise of intuition, through the contemplation of symbols, through the contemplation of spiritual teachings, philosophical ideas. There's lots of opportunities, if we take them, to here and now transcend the objective plane. And I say that only to perhaps warn against the idea that we need to wait to understand something until we're no longer hindered by this plane. I think it's the opposite. I think we are no longer hindered by this plane when we have begun to understand the more subjective, intuitive side of these ideas. But that doesn't mean that it isn't still a distraction. It's still a temptation. Senses are, our sensory experience is very, very compelling. We have these bodies that have, at least hundreds of thousands, if you believe science, maybe millions, if you believe Theosophy, years of being immersed in a sensory experience and evolving through sensory experiences. So it's very easy to say, oh, we just need to transcend that. But it's actually quite difficult.
Yeah.
But it's still worth making the effort every day, every moment, right? It's not just in meditation, but it's, I think, what Judge maybe Crosby says about the line of one's life's meditation. We should be trying to cultivate a sort of consistent or persistent, constant meditation, not just reserved for 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evening, but throughout the day, trying to cultivate continuity of consciousness. It's not easy, but it's the way forward in any case. So about 3 minutes left. Any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, just I'm trying to formulate it into a question. Just that the symbol functions on multiple levels. There's a correspondence as above, so below. There's a microcosmic application, macrocosmic application, or as you said, for every principle. So really they're like, I don't know, I guess the word is multidimensional.
That seems to be the word of the day.
Yeah. But they're, yeah, symbols like, I guess, like you said, like intuition, it's a direct pipeline to truth.
Yeah,
Truth is one, but the expressions are multiple.
right. I mean, symbols can be kind of meta, right? You can use symbols to help explain symbolism. That's what I did a little bit at the beginning of the talk, talking about, the sort of objective reality around us being an illusion, but still being useful in the same way that a classroom is useful, even though it's not real life. It's still an opportunity to learn about real life. The idea of the classroom is itself a symbol. It's a metaphor, right? Every metaphor is in its way a symbol. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for thinking of these things in the light of analogies. If it helped at all to understand the distinction between the manifest and the unmanifest, or the objective world of reality and the subjective world behind it, if it helped at all to understand that by using this analogy of the classroom, it's the power of symbols.
Mhm.
Power of a symbol, the symbol of the classroom, that allowed that understanding to just break open a little bit more. If all we did was just talk in very concrete, terms, a symbol is something that represents something else. Okay, what do you mean by that? The power of the analogy, the power of the symbol, is to actually sort of show it and bring your mind in a more intuitive way to the understanding of it.
So we should just keep working with the symbol, right? Like it's going to yield more than one, maybe.
Yeah.
Meaning.
Absolutely. Or a deeper meaning, right? You may understand something at one level, and as time goes on, it's not that your new understanding contradicts the previous understanding, but that your new understanding deepens or enhances your previous understanding. So that, as you can almost be sure that we don't know the whole of anything. There's always a process of deepening our understanding, and symbols, are a way of doing that.
Yeah. If there aren't any more, or are any more comments or questions, we can take them now. All right. I guess we'll take a break and come back to our study class on Shantideva's way, the way of the Bodhisattva. Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.